The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning haze, but the heat already clung to the boy's skin like a warning. Dust rose around his feet with every step swirling in the dry wind that carried the scent of cracked earth and something older, something heavy with memory. His name was Kaike. He was 8 years old, barefoot, and clutching a folded piece of paper against his chest as if it could protect him from the world ahead. At the top of the hill beyond the dusty path and past the split-rail fence loomed the iron gates of Fazenda Boa Esperança, the largest estate in the region. The land behind it stretched farther than most folks could see, lush, where others' soil had turned bitter. On this side of the gate, Kaike's world was made of broken fences, patched roofs, and hunger. On the other side lived power, men who didn't ask, men who didn't need to explain. He stepped forward. A guard leaning against the gatepost looked up from his chair, squinting against the sun. "What do you want, boy?" Kaike raised his chin, heart pounding so hard he thought it might echo off the metal bars. "I need to speak to Coronel Severino Alves." The guard laughed. "You think the Coronel's got time for dusty little beggars?" "I'm not here to beg." His voice came out thin but steady. "I'm here for my land." That stopped the man cold for a second. Then he let out a dry chuckle. "Your land? What land would a boy like you have, huh?" Kaike reached under his shirt, pulled out the folded paper, and held it tight in both hands. "Land that was promised to my grandfather by Coronel Zé Honorio before he died." The guard stepped forward, more curious now than annoyed. "Zé Honorio. That was years ago. What's your name, Kaike?" "Neto do Zé Vicente. He worked here." The guard's eyes narrowed. He remembered Zé Vicente. Everyone did. A vaquero who'd ridden from sunup to sundown, loyal as they came. Then he shook his head like shaking off a memory. "Even if that's true, it don't mean nothing now. Go home." "I won't leave," Kaike said. More workers began to notice. A few men leaned on their hoes. A woman paused with a bucket at her hip. Whispers started. "That's the boy of Dona Janira, Zé Vicente's grandson." "What's he holding?" Kaike stood there, small against the gate, brown eyes locked on the house in the distance, a white two-story manor shaded by jacaranda trees, like a mirage in the dry land. The paper trembled in his hands, but he didn't let go. One of the older workers murmured, "Maybe we should call the Coronel." The guard clicked his tongue, but nodded. "Fine. You want to wait? Wait. Just don't cry when he sends you off." But Kaike wasn't scared of tears. He'd seen his grandmother cry into her skirt at night, quiet so he wouldn't hear. He'd seen men cry too when their crops failed, when their cattle dropped dead in the heat. Crying wasn't weakness. It was what happened when life squeezed your heart too tight. So he waited. Flies buzzed, the sun climbed, sweat ran down the back of his neck. From the front porch of the house, Coronel Severino Alves emerged in his pressed linen shirt and polished boots. He moved with slow authority like nothing ever rushed him. Behind him walked his foreman and 2 house servants. The crowd at the gate grew larger, murmurs folding into silence as Severino approached. He stopped just short of the gate and looked down at the boy. His eyes were a pale, unreadable gray. "Who are you?" he asked, not unkindly, but with the weight of a man who expected simple things to stay in their place. "My name is Kaike. I'm the grandson of Zé Vicente." The Coronel blinked. Zé Vicente's boy Kaike nodded. "He worked for your father for 50 years. Before he died, your father promised to give him a piece of land. The land near the spring. He wrote it down, signed it." A flicker barely noticeable crossed Severino's face. What spring, the one near the stones? My grandmother said it never runs dry. You know the place. The coronel's lips pressed together. And you brought this paper. Kaike held it out with both hands, unfolding it with care, the edges soft from years of hiding. The ink was faded but legible. Names were still there. The signature of Zé Honorio, the priest's scrawl, the Chuise de Passe. The coronel took it, read it, then read it again. For a long time he said nothing. The wind blew dust across his boots. At last he spoke, and his voice had lost its casual tone. Where did you get this? From my grandmother. She kept it safe all these years. My avo died soon after your father. Severino folded the paper and looked over the gate, not at the boy now, but at the people behind him. Farmhands, housemaids, field workers, all quiet. Then a new voice shattered the moment. What is going on here, Donna Ritinha? The coronel's wife arrived like a summer storm. She wore a lace blouse, gold bracelets clinking on her wrist, and a sharp glare. Who is this child, and why are you entertaining him? Severino hesitated. He brought something from my father. Ritinha snatched the paper from his hand. She read. Her face twisted with recognition, then rage. He wants that land. That land is for our boys. It's worth more than gold, and you're standing here reading it like it's a storybook. He's got a right to speak, Severino said quietly. He has nothing. Ritinha shouted. It's an old promise to a dead man. Kaike flinched, but stood firm. It's my right. She stepped toward him, fire in her voice. You think you can walk in here with your dirty feet and steal what belongs to my sons? Severino reached out. Ritinha, enough. She turned on him. If you give away that land, you'll regret it. The coronel looked at the boy, then at the paper again. Finally he said, come back in 1 week. I need time, Ritinha hissed. 1 week to rip that paper up, you mean? But Kaike just nodded. His voice was soft but clear. 1 week. He turned and walked back down the dusty path. The crowd parted for him. Some watched with pity, some with admiration, and behind him the wind carried the dry breath of the land, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. A deathbed promise doesn't rot, even if the paper ages. The air in their home was thick with dust and memories. The wooden slats of the walls breathed the scent of old rain and soap. Outside, a rooster crowed like it hadn't slept all night. Inside, Dona Janira sat near the window, a bowl of cassava in her lap, her hands moving slow and steady, like they'd done for decades. Kaike came in quiet. He had walked all the way back from Fazenda Boa Esperança, his feet sore and streaked with red earth. His face was blank the way children wear disappointment when they don't yet know what to do with it. Janira looked up. You saw him, he nodded. What did he say? He read the letter. Told me to come back in a week. She didn't answer right away. Her hands kept working the cassava. Then she said, I knew he'd remember. He sat down on the floor, crossed his legs, stared at the old wooden chest in the corner of the room, the one she never let anyone open. The light hit it just right, catching on the cracked varnish and the nail that had always stuck out like it didn't want to stay buried. You think he'll give it? Kaike asked. Janira didn't answer. She set the bowl aside and wiped her hands on her apron. Her body moved slower these days. The bones in her knees creaked. Her breath sometimes caught on cold nights. But her voice still carried the fire of someone who had seen too much to waste words. That letter, she said, nodding toward his chest, was written with truth. That land was promised to your avo. Not as a gift, as recognition. But if it was real, Kaike said, Why didn't you give it to him sooner? Why wait all these years? Janira's eyes met his. Because men forget. Power forgets. And I was afraid. She stood, walked slowly to the wooden chest and opened it. Inside was a faded shawl, a photo in a cracked frame, and a tin box. She took the box and opened it. Letters, old rosaries. A single black and white picture of a man standing next to a horse, both looking like they'd seen more sun than rest. She pulled the letter out, held it again like it was more than paper, like it still carried the weight of a man's final breath. I kept it, she said, because I wanted you to know your avô wasn't just a laborer. He gave that family his whole life, from the time he was 12 until he couldn't ride no more. Rain, drought, fever, it didn't matter. He never quit. She sat again, holding the letter. Her thumb moved across the signature. I remember that night, she said, eyes staring out the window, as if time had thinned enough for her to see through it. Zé Honorio was dying. The doctor had stopped coming. Your avô came home pale, said the coronel had asked for him. What did he say? He said, Vicente. When that child is born, your grandchild, I want you to tell him this land near the spring is his. It's yours to pass to him. I'm writing it down. Did anyone else hear it? She nodded. The priest was there. So was the juiz de paz. A couple of the old hands, too. They signed. The old man wasn't just talking. He meant it. He knew his time was ending and he wanted to make something right. Kaique looked down. Then why didn't they give it after he died? Janira's jaw tightened. Because Zé Honorio was buried, and within 2 months, so was your grandfather. Broken from grief. And then Severino became coronel. His wife came from the city with her gold rings and her opinions. They built fences tighter, stopped calling us by name. She folded the letter again. I asked once, quietly, just to see. One of their men laughed in my face, said promises die with the man who makes them. They don't, Kaique said. This one didn't. No, Janira whispered. This one didn't. They sat in silence, the kind that stretches from one generation to the next. Outside, the light shifted. The wind stirred the dry grass. From the open window, they could hear the clink of cowbells in the distance, the deep voice of the earth calling for rain. Kaique's voice broke the stillness. If he says no, he might. Then what? Janira looked at him. Then we keep living. But we'll do it knowing we asked for what was ours. That matters. He might say yes. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that came only when hope was old and quiet. He might. The boy stood. I'll go again. In a week. You'll go clean, she said, with your shirt pressed and your hair combed. Not for them, for your avô, because you're going to that house not as a beggar, but as the grandson of a man who earned more than they ever gave. Kaique nodded. He walked over to the photo of Zé Vicente and looked at it again. His grandfather stood tall, even in that worn image hat in hand, eyes bright with something like pride. The horse beside him was old but solid, like it knew where to go even when the path disappeared. He took the letter and pressed it to his chest. Later in the quiet of evening, Janira lit a candle and whispered a prayer. She didn't ask for miracles, just fairness, just a man to remember what another man had sworn with his last breath. In the house at the top of the hill, the one with cool tiles and servants who wore shoes, Coronel Severino sat alone at his desk. The letter lay unfolded before him. He'd read it 5 times already. The signature was unmistakable. His father's writing crooked at the end, but clear. He could see the strength still in the old man's hand, even as it faded. He stared at the bottom of the page where the witnesses had signed. Padre Joaquim Jeremias, João Meireles, Juiz de Paz, Raimundo Lopes, Capataz, Zé Benedito, Vaquero, all dead except maybe one. He reached into a drawer and pulled out his father's old pocket knife, turned it over in his hand. The blade was dull, like memory, still sharp enough to cut if you didn't handle it right. He folded the letter slowly. The boy's voice echoed in his ears. "It's my right." Severino leaned back in his chair. He rubbed his temples. Outside, someone was shouting. He stood, walked toward the window. His wife's voice loud, commanding the servants. The clatter of dishes, then silence again. He looked down at the folded letter once more and felt something move in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't sure if it was shame or something worse, but he knew the land in question, and he knew what it was worth. And still his father's words rang louder than any appraisal. "When that child is born, the land is his, a promise written in ink, but carried by blood." The coroner's laugh died the moment he recognized his father's handwriting. The morning air was already beginning to shimmer with heat as Caíque climbed the hill for the second time. A week had passed since he first stood at the iron gate of Fazenda Boa Esperança, dusty and defiant. The road hadn't changed. The path still cracked beneath his feet, and the dry brush still clawed at his ankles. But something in him was different. His shirt was washed and tucked. His hair slicked back with river water. The paper, the same promise his grandfather had kept folded like a prayer, was now tucked tight against his heart. He walked alone, but he carried the weight of two lives, his own, and the one who came before. At the gate, the same guard sat chewing a toothpick, eyes narrowed. "You again," Caíque nodded. "He told me to come back." The guard stood, then leaned on the fence rail. "You brought that letter again, yes. He'll probably tell you the same thing. Go home." But there was less mockery in his voice this time. More caution. "I'm not leaving until I hear it from him." The man sighed. "Fine. Wait here." This time it didn't take long. Within minutes, Coronel Severino appeared on the front veranda of the big house dressed in a crisp white shirt, boots polished like mirrors. He walked down the front steps slowly, as if each one weighed a little more than the last. His face was unreadable, but he came alone. Behind lace curtains, Dona Ritinha watched, lips pressed tight, her jaw moving like she was chewing a fight. Severino approached the gate and looked down at Caíque. "You brought it again." Caíque nodded and held out the letter without a word. Severino took it, unfolded it with care. His hands didn't tremble, but they paused right where his father's signature began to curve across the yellowed paper. He read it again. Slower this time. His breath came heavier as he scanned the names at the bottom. 4 witnesses. 4 ghosts. Then he said almost too quietly to hear, "This is his writing." Caíque said nothing. He didn't need to. The words had already been spoken long ago. The coronel's lips pressed into a thin line. "You know what this land is worth, no?" Caíque answered. "But I know what a promise is worth." That stopped Severino cold. The boy didn't say it like a threat or a plea. He said it like fact. Behind them, a breeze kicked up, blowing dry leaves in a swirl between the gateposts. Severino stared at the letter again, then at the boy. Then he laughed sharp, quick, like something forced out of him. "You've got nerve, I'll say that." Most men wouldn't come up here twice. I'm not most men. A smile twitched at the corners of Severino's mouth before it vanished. No, you're not. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. Donna Ritina came marching down the veranda steps, skirts flaring, bracelets clinking like warning bells. Her lips were painted too red, her voice already raised before she reached them. What is this now, still entertaining this nonsense? Severino didn't answer her. She grabbed the letter from his hand before he could react. Her eyes scanned the page with rapid fury. This again, Francisco, this land is for our boys. You're not seriously... My name's Severino, he cut in. She ignored him. This is ridiculous. That land is half the reason this whole fazenda still breathes. It's got the spring, it's closest to the road, the soil's the best in the region. And yet Severino said, it was promised. To a child. To a servant's grandson. You think your father knew what that land would become? He knew enough to sign his name. Ritina's face turned to stone. If you give it away, you're giving away your legacy. I'm keeping his. Kaique hadn't moved. His hands were balled into fists at his sides, not in anger, but in effort, trying to stay still, trying not to tremble. Ritina wheeled on him. You think this is yours? You think walking here barefoot and waving old paper at a gate makes you someone? I think promises matter, he said. And that land was promised to my grandfather. It's not yours, she spat. It's mine. It's my son's. Severino stepped between them. Ritina, enough. But she was already gone inside the door, slamming so hard behind her, it echoed across the fields. Severino turned back to the boy. His voice was tired. Do you even know what to do with land I'll learn? He studied Kaique's face for a long time. Something flickered there, respect maybe. Maybe guilt. Then Severino handed the letter back. Come back tomorrow morning. Early. If I'm going to decide something, I'll do it right. With witnesses. Kaique nodded. Yes, sir. And tell your grandmother, I remember Zé Vicente. I remember he rode in storms others wouldn't walk through. Kaique's voice softened. He was proud to work for your father. Severino didn't answer. He watched the boy turn and walk back down the path, the letter once again held to his chest. Behind the lace curtain, Ritina's silhouette stood still. Inside the big house, she began to boil. And across the village, the story had already begun to move. From market stalls to church benches, from one pair of cracked lips to the next. They whispered, the boy came back. They said he had the coronel in silence. And someone asked the question that no one could answer yet. Will he keep the promise? The wind stirred the branches over the spring near the stones. The earth remembered, and so did the people. Once a story lands in the mouth of the people, it no longer belongs to those who tried to bury it. The news cracked open the village like dry soil after rain. By the time the rooster crowed again, everyone knew. From the old man who sharpened knives near the well to the women folding laundry in the river's bend, the same words passed like a current. The boy went back. The coronel listened. There's a promise. A land. Some shook their heads, saying it was foolish, a waste of hope. Others whispered that maybe, just maybe, justice had turned its face to the poor, even if just for a blink. By mid-morning, the main street of Bella Sombra buzzed. The open-air market brimmed with chatter, louder than the donkeys braying. Beneath hanging plantains and sun-bleached cloth awnings, voices swirled like birds unsettled before a storm. He walked up there again, they said, murmured Donna Nilda, rearranging okra on her stall. In a clean shirt, too, added her neighbor. De Janeira's boy. Got the same eyes as old Zé Vicente. A man sitting on an overturned crate nodded. If it's true, that land near the spring. That's no scrap. That's a blessing. In the back of the crowd, Taina stood silent, listening. She was taller than Kaike by a few months, with long black hair braided tightly down her back, and the steady gaze of someone raised by silence more than noise. Her mother came from the Tupinamba, and her father from nowhere in particular. She'd known Kaike since both of them could walk, and she knew the shape of his stubbornness. She made her way through the crowd, lifting her skirt to dodge a spilled bucket of onions, and slipped down the alley toward the back road that led to Kaike's house. She found him there, kneeling beside his grandmother's little garden, pulling weeds with focus. "You really did it," she said. He didn't look up. "I said I would. Everyone's talking. Let them." She crouched beside him. "You nervous?" He paused. "A little. Good. You'd be stupid not to be." That made him smile. They worked side by side in silence for a while, the sun climbing higher, the dry soil crumbling beneath their fingers. Taina looked over. "If he says yes, what will you do first?" "I'll build a fence," he said. "Not to keep people out. Just so I know it's real." "Then what plant?" "What I don't know yet. But something that stays. Something with roots." Taina leaned back on her hands. "You really think a piece of land changes things?" He looked at her then. "I don't think the land is the change. I think the promise is." She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away. Up on the hill, the mood was far different. Donna Ritinha paced the length of the veranda, lips pressed so tight they were nearly colorless. Her gold bracelets jangled with every step, not as decoration, but as warning. "Are you just going to give it away?" she snapped. Coronel Severino sat in his usual chair staring into the distance, as if the land itself might answer. "It was never mine to keep," he said. "It's ours," she hissed. "Ours and our boys. You think when your father scribbled that promise he thought the land would be worth what it is now? He knew it had water," Severino said. "That's worth more than gold. Then you admit you're throwing a fortune at a barefoot child with a story." He turned his head slowly. "I admit I'm thinking." She slammed her palm against the wooden column beside her. "He comes here, tells you a tale, waves some wrinkled paper, and you fold like you owe him the world." "I owe my father," he said. "That's different." She didn't answer, just stormed back into the house. Later that afternoon, a rider arrived at the Fazenda one no one expected. Dr. Cicero Barreto, a man of silk shirts and silver spurs, dismounted with a smile too white for the dust-covered landscape. He was rich in the way that only men who never tilled their own soil could be. He was offered water. Declined. He was offered shade. Declined. He wanted only a word with the coronel. Severino met him under the jacaranda tree. "I hear," Cicero began smoothly, "that there's a boy with a claim." Severino didn't answer. Cicero leaned in. "I also hear that the land in question has a spring." Still nothing. "Now, Coronel, I'm a man of business. I don't meddle in family matters or ghosts. I come with a proposal." Severino raised a brow. Cicero opened his leather satchel and pulled out a thick envelope. "Buy the land. All of it. Right now. I'll pay double what anyone else would. You'll walk away with a fortune. The boy can be sent off with something generous, and everyone keeps their legacy clean." Severino didn't even glance at the envelope. "This isn't just land," he said. "It's a question." Cicero's smile tightened. "And I'm offering an answer." Severino stood. "Come back when you know the difference between the two." Cicero left slower than he came. By nightfall, the wind carried his name through the village too. Kaique heard it from his grandmother as she brought in the laundry. Some rich man was up there today, rode in like a movie villain. Kaique's hands clenched around the shirt he was folding. Djanira looked at him. Whatever happens, remember truth has legs. It don't always run fast, but it don't stop either. He nodded, but sleep came hard that night. In the dark, he heard his grandfather's name echo in the silence, and far up the hill under the black sky and the stars that didn't care who owned what, Coronel Severino sat alone with the letter again, holding it in both hands, like something fragile, something living. It was more than paper now. It was decision. It was weight. It was the edge of what came next. Money passes from hand to hand. Land grows roots and demands blood. The envelope sat on the coronel's desk like a sleeping snake. It was thick, sealed, and stamped with the dark wax of the Barreto family crest. Inside was more money than most families in Bella Sombra would see in a lifetime, neatly bundled cash, enough to put new roofs on every house in the village and still have change left for gold teeth and full bellies. But Coronel Severino hadn't touched it. He'd read the letter twice. The offer was simple: sell the land near the spring. No questions, no delays. The buyer, Duter Cicero Barreto, promised discretion, efficiency, and a price too good to ignore. Even offered a gesture of goodwill, enough to silence the boy and make him disappear. Severino stared at the fire in the hearth. His boots crossed the paper resting on his lap. Outside, the cicadas had begun their night choir, and somewhere in the back pasture, a horse snorted in its sleep. The door creaked open behind him. Still thinking, came a voice he didn't care to hear. Donna Ritina stepped inside, arms crossed over her chest. She wore a white silk nightgown that caught the firelight, but her face was all shadow, tight-lipped, hollow-eyed, watching him like a predator, waiting to pounce. "I'm not selling," he said without turning. "You didn't even open it." "I don't need to." She walked past the desk, her heels tapping the tile like a ticking clock. She picked up the envelope and held it up to the light, then turned to face him. "This would buy you a new truck, a new barn, tutors for the boys, a future. I have a future. No, Severino, you have memories and debts. Don't pretend your father's words are worth more than what's in here." He stood finally facing her. "This isn't about money. It's always about money. You just don't like to admit it." "No," he said softly. "It's about what you pass on." She flinched just barely, but he saw it. Then she snapped. "So pass on the legend then, tell the story over soup and forget the land. Make it poetry. But don't give away the best piece of this estate to a barefoot child who'll turn it to dust. It's not the boy. It's the promise." Ritina threw the envelope onto the desk. "You're a fool. And you," I said, his voice firming, "have forgotten what it means to owe someone who never asked for anything." Silence cut between them like a blade. She walked out without another word, her perfume lingering like something artificial and choking. Severino sat back down and ran a hand through his graying hair. He picked up the envelope, opened it slowly, and pulled out the bills. So many. Clean, crisp, weightless. He looked toward the small frame on his shelf, his father Zé Honorio in black and white holding a hat in one hand and resting the other on a boy's shoulder. The land was promised before that picture was taken. A knock came at the door. "Come in," he said. Seu Raimundo, his oldest foreman, stepped inside, a man of few words and deep eyes, his hat pressed respectfully against his chest. "Coronel," he said. Severino nodded. "You were here the day my father signed that letter, I was. Do you remember why Raimundo's gaze didn't flinch? Because he didn't want to die owing Zé Vicente more than a thank you. Severino leaned forward. What do you think I should do? Raimundo looked at the fire, then at the envelope on the desk. You already know, it's complicated. Raimundo shook his head. No, sir. It's simple. It's just hard. He left after that. No blessing, no judgment. Just truth spoken quiet like a prayer. The next morning, Kaique woke early. He hadn't slept much. The night pressed in heavy, full of thoughts that didn't leave him alone. He dressed in the same shirt he'd worn before, now faded and clean, and ate half a boiled egg in silence. Djanira placed her hand on his head before he left. Whatever happens, you already honored your avô. You already proved you have his courage. Kaique nodded, swallowed the tightness in his throat, and stepped into the rising sun. He found Taina waiting at the edge of the trail, her braid swinging down her back, a satchel over her shoulder. You don't have to come, he said. I'm not coming for you, she shrugged. I want to see what justice looks like. They walked in silence, the road rising toward the hill. The heat was dry and sharp, and the wind carried the dust behind them, like a trail of smoke. At the gate, the guard didn't speak, just opened it. Kaique stepped through, the heart thudding. The house stood as before, but white and distant, proud in its stillness. But the weight in the air was different. He was expected. On the veranda, Severino sat at a small wooden table with papers, a fountain pen, and a heavy clay cup of coffee. He didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. Come, he said. Kaique stepped forward. I read the letter again, Severino said. I thought about the land, its worth, its future. He glanced behind him toward the window where curtains shifted though Ritinha didn't appear. Then a man came offering me more than the land was worth. Enough to buy silence. Comfort. Kaique's throat tightened. I considered it, the coronel continued. More than I'd like to admit. He looked at the boy fully then. But something my father taught me never left. What was it, Kaique asked quietly? That the man you want to be should never lose to the man you're afraid to disappoint. He stood. I need one more day. Not for delay, for dignity. I'll have my answer in the morning. My final word. Kaique didn't argue, didn't plead. He nodded. I'll come back, he said. As he turned to leave, Severino called after him, voice lower, gentler. You look like him, you know. Zé Vicente. Kaique blinked against the sun. I hope I make him proud. You already did. The boy walked down the hill with Taina beside him, neither speaking. Behind them, the land waited dry, ancient, watching, and beneath the dust roots had begun to stir. Some men build fences to protect what's theirs. Others build them to keep the truth from coming in. Dona Ritinha had barely slept. The velvet curtains of the master bedroom were still drawn tight, yet the thin morning light pushed through the edges like truth pressing into a lie. She sat on the edge of the bed in a silk robe, her hands resting in her lap, motionless, but buzzing with tension. Severino had not come to bed. She knew where he was. She didn't need to check. He was downstairs, in his father's study, with that letter. The sound of quiet boots on tile came and went below. A chair creaked. Water ran. Then silence again. But not peace. She tightened the belt around her waist and walked to the window. From there, she could see the stretch of land beyond the east field, the one near the spring. Not just any land, the most fertile patch they had. It was green even when everything else browned and cracked. A strip of miracle, and Severino was about to hand it to a child. She turned sharply and walked out of the room, down the stairs, across the hall, to the heavy door of the study. She didn't knock. "You're making a mistake," she said, stepping in. He was sitting at the desk, the letter open in front of him, an empty cup beside it. His eyes were bloodshot. Not from drink, he hadn't touched any, but from a night spent thinking. "Morning," he said without looking up. She moved closer. "This has gone far enough. You're about to throw away the best land we own because of some faded ink." "I told you," he said. "It wasn't about the ink." "It's not too late," she said. "Send him off. Give him a few bills if you want to soothe your guilt. But don't give him our land." Severino finally looked up. "It's not ours." "Then whose is it?" Her voice cracked. "Yours, mine, our sons. What do you tell them when they grow up and ask why their father gave away the spring?" He pushed his chair back and stood. "I'll tell them the truth. That a man keeps his father's word even when it costs him something. You think that boy will build a future there? You think he knows how to work it, how to protect it? That land will be overrun within months. You'll have given away history for a handful of weeds." Severino didn't answer. He walked past her to the window, looked out at the same stretch of green she had just seen. "He looks like Zé Vicente," he said. Ritinha's voice turned cold. "That doesn't make him a man." "No. But standing at my gate with nothing in his hands but the truth, that does." She stared at him, then shook her head slowly. "If you sign that paper, don't expect me to stand beside you when the vultures come. You'll be on your own." He met her eyes. "Maybe that's how this ends." She left without slamming the door. He returned to the desk, sat, looked at the letter one last time, folded it carefully, and pulled the document he'd written the night before from a drawer, the final version. No edits, no loopholes. He set his pen to it. Across the village, Kaika pulled on his cleanest pants and buttoned his shirt with shaking fingers. His grandmother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him not with fear, but with something deeper, quiet pride. "You don't rush a good answer," she said. "If it's real, it takes time." He nodded, checking his pockets again, though there was nothing to carry. Everything that mattered was already said. Outside, Taina waited under the jacaranda tree. She had a small cloth bag over her shoulder, her braid tucked under a straw hat. "You look scared," she said as he approached. "I am." "Good. That means you still care." They walked the road side by side, and for the first time people stepped out of their doorways to watch them pass, not with mockery, not with doubt. Some nodded. Others whispered blessings. A few children followed behind for a few yards, curious but quiet. The gate of the fazenda stood open. The guard nodded. Inside, everything was still. Too still. They walked the long stretch toward the house. The sun rose higher, not hot yet, but heavy. On the veranda, Severino waited at a small table. A folder sat closed in front of him. His hat was on the chair beside him, his face lined but calm. "Sit," he said. Kaike did. Severino looked at him for a long moment, then at Taina. "You may stay," he told her. She nodded once and stepped back, resting against the wall in the shade. The coronel opened the folder. "This," he said, "is a formal land transfer. It names you as the inheritor of a plot bordering the eastern spring, marked by the old boundary stones and confirmed by the priest's records. It recognizes the verbal agreement made between my father and your grandfather, and affirms its legal value through witness signatures, mine and two others who were present when he signed the original." He paused. I added one condition. Kaike's breath caught. What is it you don't sell it? Not to Barreto. Not to anyone. You keep it. Work it. Make it something worth passing on. I swear, Kaike said, his voice steady now. I won't ever sell it. Severino handed him the pen. Kaike reached for it with both hands. His name came out slowly, one letter at a time, as if each one weighed more than the last. Severino signed beneath it. Taina stepped forward, signed as witness. Then Severino stood, held out his hand. Kaike looked at it, then took it. You have something rare now, the coronel said. Don't waste it. I won't, and tell your grandmother. Thank you for not throwing this letter away when the world told her it meant nothing. Kaike nodded, unable to speak. They left the house in silence, but the world outside was waiting. Word traveled faster than birds that day. The boy had the land. The spring had a new keeper. And from the ridge above the trail, a silver car sat quietly under a lone acacia tree. Inside, Cicero Barreto tapped his finger on the steering wheel, watching the children walk away with a folder clutched to the boy's chest. His jaw tightened. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a black notebook, and scribbled a name. He didn't smile. Some men, after all, built fences for different reasons. Some victories echo like thunder, loud, fast, gone. But the quiet ones grow roots. The morning after the land became his, Kaike stood at the edge of it. It wasn't marked by flags or fences yet, just a stretch of earth that sloped gently down toward the spring, dotted with scattered stones, tufts of wild grass, and the bones of an old wooden post that time had half swallowed. But it was his. He knelt, ran his fingers through the dirt, dark and soft, near the waterline, dry and stubborn farther out. It smelled of roots, silence, and something older than history. Behind him, the sun rose over the ridge like it had for centuries, not caring whose name was on a deed. Taina came up the hill carrying a small satchel and a clay jug sloshing with fresh spring water. Her braid was tucked under a scarf, sleeves rolled up. You gonna sit there all day like it's a throne? She asked, smiling. I'm just looking, he said. Still doesn't feel real. Well, it is, and it's not going to plant itself. She set the jug down beside him and handed him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were 3 yam bulbs and a handful of corn kernels still dusted with field dirt. From my mother, she said. She said, start with what feeds, not what sells. He smiled, stood, and took the bundle carefully. Tell her thank you. They spent the morning clearing the edge of the plot where thorns had crept in. No machetes, just steady hands, sweat, and time. By mid-morning, the sun had begun to bite. They stopped to drink sitting in the shade of a twisted guava tree. You gonna build something here? She asked. Yeah, a little shack to store tools. Maybe something with a porch. For thinking. Taina smirked. You'll need wood. I'll ask Seo Raimundo. He knows the hills. She stretched her legs out, toes brushing the dirt. You'll also need help. I was hoping you'd say that. She didn't answer, but her grin widened. Down in the village, word had settled into the bones of the place. The old women talked about it while sewing in doorways. The men nodded across bar counters and leaned on fence posts like the wind had shifted. The boy had land. Not just any land, the spring land. And he wasn't selling. Not even to the likes of Barreto. That last part came from a whisper out of the church steps spread by Donna Elza, who claimed to have seen Cicero's driver pacing outside the coronel's house 2 days before the signing. By the next afternoon, Cicero's name floated like smoke, visible unwanted. Inside his hilltop estate, Cicero poured a second glass of sugarcane whiskey and stared at the map pinned to the wall. It was marked with pins red thread stretched between property's wells and old cart roads. Boa Esperanza was circled, the spring property underlined. He turned to Elias, his right hand a quiet man with soft eyes and a knife scar on his left cheek. "Did you confirm the signature?" Elias nodded. "It's legal, filed with the notary this morning. And the boy, he's already working the land." Cicero downed the glass, exhaled through his nose. "Then it's time to tighten the ring." Elias didn't ask what that meant. He knew. Meanwhile, back at the property, Caïque stood with Janira, her bare feet sunk into the soft ground. Her hands held a rusted tin cup of water, and her eyes were full of something he hadn't seen in years. "This was your grandfather's favorite corner," she said, pointing to a tree stump that had long since rotted to moss. "He used to sit there to rest his knees. Said it was where the earth breathed best." Caïque listened quietly. He would have been proud. Not just for what you got, for how you got it. "I still don't know how to keep it," he admitted. "You'll learn," she said. "You come from people who don't fold easy." He turned to her. "Do you think they'll come for it, try to take it?" Janira's gaze darkened slightly. "Maybe, but this time we're not alone." She was right. That night, Caïque returned to the plot and found 4 figures waiting near the spring. Seu Raimundo, Taina's uncle Juca, Dona Elza holding a lantern, and Pedro do Vento, the old carpenter, whose hands looked like dry branches. "I heard you might be building something," Pedro said. "I've still got a good saw." "Thought you could use some boundary posts," Juca added, dropping a bundle of wood at his feet. "I brought cassava cakes," Elza said. "Can't work a field on an empty stomach." Raimundo just clapped a calloused hand on Caïque's shoulder. "Your avô helped me bury a cow in a flood once." "This is nothing." Caïque felt the burn behind his eyes. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. The night stretched wide and open above them. Stars dusted the sky, and below the first corner post was hammered into the soil with a single hard thud. It echoed in the hills, the beginning of a fence not to close anything off, but to mark that something had begun. Far off in the dark edge of the road, a figure on horseback paused, watching the scene unfold from a ridge. Elias didn't speak, just turned his horse and rode back through the trees. He had a message to deliver. The land wasn't for sale, which meant soon it would be up for war. Sometimes they don't take your land, they choke the road to it. The next morning brought no warning. The rooster crowed late, and the air tasted off like rust in the mouth of the wind. Caïque stepped out, early boots barely laced, expecting to hear the usual clatter of birds and mourning cattle. But the silence was too deep. Not peaceful. Hollow. By the time he reached the road to the spring, he saw it. A fence. Brand new. Thick posts, freshly hammered, ran straight across the access road. Not at the boundary. Not on his land. But just before it. On what had always been open pasture shared by the neighbors and grazing cattle since anyone could remember. At the center of the fence was a sign burnt into a clean slab of wood, private property. Entry prohibited. Taina came jogging up behind him, sweat already darkening her collar. She stopped short when she saw it. "What the hell is this?" Caïque didn't answer. He stepped closer, examined the fresh nails, the clean cuts on the lumber, the precision of the job. This wasn't local work. Too neat, too fast. Someone with money sent this. "It's not on my land," he said finally. "But it's meant to block mine." They both turned as a black truck rumbled up the road, tires crunching gravel with calm cruelty. It slowed to a stop, and the passenger window rolled down. Elias leaned out, sunglasses reflecting the sky. "You should have sold," he said. Kaique didn't move. "This land ain't a prize," Elias continued. "It's an inconvenience. You're young, but let me tell you something. Men like Barreto don't leave things half-finished." Taina stepped forward. "You blocking a public path. This goes to the church spring, to the old route." "Funny thing," Elias said. "Turns out this patch of pasture bought it last month. Quiet deal. All legal. Now it's ours. And you'll need another way." The truck idled for a moment longer, then rolled away, dust curling behind it like a slow threat. Kaique stood still for a long time. The birds returned to the trees finally. But the silence between him and the fence held. Back at the village, the story cracked open like a dropped pot. They'd blocked the road. The boy's land had been cut off. Pedro Dovento spit tobacco into the dirt. Barrito's playing ugly now. Djanira crossed herself at the sound of his name. Always said a man who owns too much land starts thinking he owns the sky too. In the corner of the bar, Seu Raimundo said only, "They drew the line. Time to draw ours." By midday, Kaique stood at the church steps holding a rolled parchment under one arm. He waited until Mass ended, until the old priest came out, wiping his brow. "I need the maps," Kaique said. Father Elias squinted. "The surveyor maps, the original ones. The old roads, the church trails, anything that shows access to the spring." The priest nodded slowly. "Come with me." In the back archives, buried under hymnals and receipts, Kaique found what he needed. A faded map drawn decades ago. Hand-sketched lines, public trails, and one narrow path forgotten by most that curved behind the hillside through a grove of jacaranda trees. He pressed his finger against it. It touched the edge of his land. He had a way in. Not the road, but a path. Legal, public, barely used, overgrown and hard, but open. He brought it back to Pedro Huca and Taina, laid it out on Janira's table under the flickering light bulb. "We'll cut through here," he said, tracing the trail. "We'll make it wide enough for a cart." Pedro leaned in. "It's tight. Might take weeks. Then we start today." By the next morning they had axes. The work was slow. The jacaranda grove had grown wild. Vines thicker than wrists twisted around the trees, and thorns clawed at ankles. But with each swing of the machete, the path widened. Kids came to watch. Some brought fruit. Others offered to carry brush. Even Dona Nilda showed up with a pot of stew. "They think you're making a road for all of us now," she said. "I am, Kaique," replied, wiping sweat from his brow. Word reached Cicero by sundown. Elias stood stiff at the door arms behind his back. "They found another way in," he said. Cicero didn't look up from his drink. "How long until it's usable?" "Hard to say. But they started clearing it." Cicero swirled the liquid in his glass. "Then burn it." Elias blinked. "Sir, the path. It's dry, isn't it? Groves catch easy. Make it look like wind carried a spark from a cooking fire. Nothing official. Just a reminder." Elias hesitated. Cicero didn't repeat himself. That night, Kaique sat on a log beside the spring legs, aching arms sore but heart full. Taina sat beside him, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. "They'll come again," she said softly. "I know. They'll push harder. I'll stand." A soft breeze rustled the trees. In the quiet, he could almost hear the land breathe. Then the smell hit them sharp, bitter, unmistakable. Smoke. They turned. Orange light flickered above the grove. No, Kaike said, already running. By the time they reached the edge of the path, flames were licking the lower trunks, swallowing brush. Someone screamed. Water buckets flew. Men shouted. The fire didn't last long, but it was enough. Enough to blacken the trail, enough to scorch their progress, enough to send a message. Kaike stood at the edge of the ruined chest, heaving fists clenched. Taina stepped beside him. "This isn't just about land anymore," she said. "No," he answered. "It never was." The fire wasn't meant to destroy land. It was meant to burn belief. Smoke still curled from the blackened grove the next morning. Ash coated the ground like spilled salt, and the air carried that ghost-sour smell of scorched bark and melted roots. The trail was no longer impassable, but it was crippled, charred branches leaned like broken limbs across what had been their path. Kaike stood at the edge, a machete in one hand, the other holding a wet cloth against his mouth. Around him, a few men from the village cleared debris in silence. The work was slow, and the silence louder than any blaze. Taina approached, sweat streaking the dust on her cheeks. "You see the way the fire moved?" He nodded, started low, followed the new cut, not the wind. Deliberate. "Yeah." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. Just then, a pair of boots crunched behind them. It was Coronel Severino, his coat slung over one shoulder, hat in hand. His face was darker than usual, his brow furrowed beneath the weight of something more than heat. "I came as soon as I heard," he said. Kaike turned. "They tried to close me off." Severino nodded slowly. "Barreto's behind it." "No doubt. You think the law will stop him?" The older man gave a dry laugh. "Barreto owns half the courthouse, and the judge owes him a new roof." Kaike looked back at the path. "So what do we do?" Severino studied the burn marks, the way the flame had licked but not swallowed. "You keep clearing," he said. "You don't let him see it worked. He'll keep coming." Severino's voice dropped. "That's why you need more than good neighbors now. You need eyes, you need weight, you need your own circle." Kaike narrowed his eyes. "You offering help?" Severino shrugged. "I'm offering memory. Your grandfather helped build half the fences on this land. He's owed." They stared at each other a beat longer. Then Kaike nodded. "Then let's make it count." Word spread fast again. Not just about the fire, but about who showed up in the ashes. People started to whisper something new. The boy's not standing alone anymore. Pedro brought fresh wood. Raimundo brought more hands. Even Dona Ritinha, without stepping off her veranda, sent a bundle of tools and an old water barrel down the hill. No note, no signature. But Kaike knew where it came from. By the third day, the path had shape again, wider than before, firmer. It curved deeper around the burnt trees, careful and clear. At night, Kaike slept near the spring, curled under a makeshift tarp, while Taina kept watch. The silence between them grew heavier but warmer, like shared burden. One morning, as the sky barely blushed with sunrise, Janira came up the path holding something wrapped in cloth. She laid it in Kaike's hands. "It was your grandfather's." He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a rusted, heavy revolver. The handle was worn smooth from use, the barrel still engraved with the initials ZV. "I didn't know he had this." Janira's voice was soft. He didn't like needing it. But he knew the land never stays quiet. Kaike turned the weapon over in his palm. "I don't want to fight. You don't have to. But some men only respect the sound of something that bites." He wrapped it back up, tucked it inside the satchel with care. Not to flash, not to threaten, but to remind himself of what the land once cost. That evening, just as the final post of the new trail was hammered in, a rider appeared at the edge of the ridge. Dust cloaked him like a second skin. His horse was dark and lean, foaming at the mouth from a hard gallop. He dismounted slowly and removed his hat. Lucas, one of Barretto's younger cousins, known for causing trouble with a smile and leaving it behind him. He didn't step forward. Got a message, he called out. Kayike didn't move. Then speak. Lucas smirked. The doctor says you're welcome to reconsider. He's still got money. More than you'll make planting roots. I've already got roots, Kayike said. Then maybe he'll start buying the branches. Lucas turned to leave, but added, and if I were you, I'd keep your grandmother inside tomorrow night. Silence followed him all the way down the path. Taina stepped beside Kayike. That sounded like more than a warning. He nodded. It was a threat. That night the village bristled. Lights stayed on late. Windows were latched. Dogs barked more than usual. Kayike sat outside Janira's house, the revolver within arm's reach, listening for anything out of place. Nothing came. Not yet. But the threat had done its job. The air had shifted again. By dawn, Kayike went back to the land and stared at the ridge where Lucas had appeared. A figure approached, this time on foot. Elias. Not smiling. Not mocking. Just present. Kayike didn't speak. Elias stood a few paces away, hands loose at his sides. You're making people nervous, he said. Kayike shrugged. Good. Elias looked past him to the green starting to sprout where yam bulbs had been buried days ago. Tiny shoots breaking the soil. You're stubborn. So was my grandfather. Elias kicked at a rock. Barretto won't stop. I'm not waiting for him to. You think you can protect it forever? Kayike's voice was steady. No. But I can make it cost him. Elias finally met his eyes. And for the first time there was something close to respect in them. He turned to leave. Tell him Kayike said next time he sends fire I won't just dig a new path. Elias paused. What will you do? I'll make sure the ashes land on his porch. The older man gave a short nod, then disappeared back down the trail. As the sun climbed, the spring gurgled beside him, steady and clear. The land was no longer just dirt. It was declaration. It was refusal. It was the place where silence ended, and now it had teeth. When a man can't buy what he wants, he starts breaking what he can't own. The rooster didn't crow the next morning. Not because it was dead, though, that would have made more sense, but because it was missing. Gone from the coop without a trace. No blood, no feathers, just an open latch swinging in the wind. Janira found the gate to the small garden ajar, too. Her tomato plants trampled. The bucket she'd left hanging on the fence was crushed flat in the dirt, like someone had stepped on it and smiled while doing it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply walked back inside, set the kettle on the stove, and began brewing her coffee slower than usual. Her hands trembled only once when she reached for the sugar, and only long enough for her to close her eyes and steady them again. By the time Kayike arrived, she was already sweeping the steps with calm, deliberate strokes. They came through here, he asked, jaw tight. Just after midnight, I think, she said. Didn't wake me. I'm getting old. You think it was them? She didn't answer, just glanced at the broken garden and the empty coop. I'll fix it, Kayike said. Janira looked him over. Saw the wear in his shoulders, the red in his eyes. No, boy. You'll plant. You'll water. You'll keep the land alive. Let others help with the mess. He nodded, but his fists remained clenched. Later that afternoon, at the edge of the trail, 3 men from the village stood waiting. Juca, Pedro, Seu Raimundo. They crossed a line, Juca said. They want to shake the roots, Raimundo added. Kaique looked from one to the other. You sure? Pedro held up a slingshot, snapped clean in half, its leather burnt at the edge. They left this at my doorstep. It was my grandson's. Juca spat. They're not warning anymore. They're testing. Seeing if we'll fold. We won't, Kaique said. They didn't speak after that. Just nodded once and walked toward the plot together. The yams had begun to sprout. Small green heads pushing up through soil that remembered every boot step, every prayer, every drop of sweat. Corn had started showing too tentative but present. Life nudging forward. And still the message lingered, break what you can't buy. At night the dogs barked more. Children were kept in, and Cicero Barreto poured his second drink without looking at the fire flickering in his study. Elias stood by the window. He hadn't sat down in an hour. He's holding, Elias said. The path's cleared again. They've started planting full rows. Cicero rubbed his forehead. You were right. Fire wasn't enough. Elias hesitated. Maybe we stop here. Cicero looked at him for the first time. You think this is about him? He's just a kid with a plot. No, Cicero said, voice low and sharp. He's a flag. And if that flag stands, others will follow. This isn't about one boy. It's about the rest thinking they can keep what's not nailed down. He's not letting go, then we'll break the hammer. The words sat in the room like gunpowder. Kaique didn't know what would come next, but he felt it building. Like the sky before a storm, hot, swollen, tight with silence. That evening he met Taina by the spring. She handed him a tin of salted meat and a wrapped flatbread. He hadn't eaten since morning. You should sleep, she said, sitting beside him. I can't. You afraid they'll come again? I know they will. She leaned back on her elbows, eyes scanning the stars. I used to think land was just ground, dirt. Now it feels like it breathes. It does, he said. Breathes, bleeds, remembers. She turned her face toward him. So what happens if they come to take it again? Not just scare you, really try. Kaique didn't answer right away. I don't want to fight, he said. But I won't run. The revolver rested beneath the tarp near his bedroll. Cleaned, loaded, waiting. But he still hoped it would never need to speak. In the middle of the night, the first stone hit the fence post. Then another. Then 3 more in quick succession. Pedro's warning bell rang out once, a high clang from the tool hung above his shack. Kaique was already up and running. By the time he reached the edge of the trail, 4 men had scattered into the trees. Nothing stolen. Nothing burned. Just damage a post pulled loose, seedlings trampled, the wooden water barrel splintered. A message. They were getting closer. When dawn came, Kaique stood in the center of his field, surrounded by the damage. But he wasn't alone. People came, one by one. Taina, Juca, Pedro, Dona Elza, Raimundo. Then more. A quiet tide of neighbors, farmers, sons, old men with walking sticks and young girls carrying baskets. None asked what happened. They didn't need to. They just started picking up, replacing, replanting, repairing. Elza handed him a folded piece of cloth. Inside was a small wooden carving, an eagle with one wing lifted. From my husband's father, she said. Kept it during the drought. Said it reminded him not to bow. Kaike tucked it in his pocket. A symbol. A seed. And somewhere beyond the trees, a man with too much land ground his teeth watching from behind tinted glass. Cicero Barreto lowered his binoculars. They're digging in, Elias said beside him. Then we stop watching, Cicero muttered. We start pushing. Elias frowned. With what? The doctor turned his voice like flint on metal. Whatever it takes. The wheels were turning. Dust had risen. And somewhere in the hills, something old stirred again. Because when a man can't buy what he wants, he starts breaking what he can't own. And what he can't break, he learns to fear. A man can only be pushed so far before standing still becomes a kind of war. Rain came without warning. Not the kind that passed in minutes, but a long soaking rain that turned the trail to mud and bent the cornrows sideways. The sky wept for 2 days straight, and on the third morning the village smelled like wet wood rust and something else like nerves worn raw. Kaike stood in the doorway of the half-built shack, staring out at his waterlogged land. The structure barely had walls, but it kept the rain off his head. He and Pedro had planned to finish the roof that week, but the weather had pushed everything back. Every chore took twice as long. The wheelbarrow kept sinking. The yams were drowning, and the letters started arriving. 2 so far, folded tight and shoved under the fence post like rats afraid to knock. The first was typed on clean white paper. A warning. Something about permits. The second was shorter, handwritten, and uglier. 1 sentence. You'll leave in pieces or you'll be buried whole. Taina burned it before Kaike could decide what to do with it. She didn't speak while it turned to ash, just stood there with the match trembling between her fingers. He hadn't told Janira yet. He didn't want to see that look in her eyes again, not the one that feared for him, but the one that remembered too much. Too many men taken too soon for standing in the wrong place at the right time. That afternoon, he rode into the village to meet Severino. The coronel was waiting on the steps of the notary's office, hands in his coat pockets, lips pressed tight. You're not going to like what I heard, Severino said. Kaike didn't answer, just nodded once. Barreto's filed an injunction, the old man continued. Claims part of your land encroaches onto a disputed tract he's trying to rezone. It's thin, but he's got the judge and half the council in his pocket. I have the title. He knows. He doesn't care. This isn't about the land anymore, it's about exhausting you. How long does it take to fight it? Months. Maybe years. I don't have years. Severino's jaw tensed. That's exactly what he's betting on. Kaike stared down the road, watching a boy chase a goat past the bakery. Life didn't stop for lawsuits or rain or threats. It just kept moving. I'm not folding, he said. I didn't think you would. Back at the shack, Pedro was waiting with a bundle of roofing tin and a strange look on his face. Someone came by, he said, eyes narrowed. Didn't catch his name. Said he was from the city. Looked like he never held a tool in his life. What did he want? Said he was a mediator. Offered to buy the land. Quiet sale. Cash in hand. Kaike almost laughed. That's the peace offer. Pedro shook his head. No, that's the final test. He wants to know if you still bleed. That night, Kaike sat by the spring with the old revolver across his lap. Not aiming, just holding, feeling the weight of it. Taina came to sit beside him, her boots muddy, her shoulders slumped. They'll keep coming, she said softly. I know. They'll chip away like termites. Not all at once. Little bits, until you're hollow. He looked at her. Would you leave if it were you? She answered without hesitation. No. But I'd dig deeper. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The next day they did just that. They planted more, built more, fortified the trail with stones so no storm could wash it out again. Every swing of the hammer was a reply. Every seed pressed into the earth said, I'm still here. And then the third letter came. But this one was different. It was signed. C. Barreto. It read, Your land's not worth the blood it'll take to keep it. Think about your grandmother. Think about your girl. Think carefully. Kaiki folded it slowly, slipped it into his pocket, and walked to the village without a word. The notary's office was closed. He went to the church. Father Elias was sweeping the steps. Can you witness something? Kaike asked. The priest looked up. Now, yes. I want it on record. Inside the small back room, Kaike placed his land deed on the table. Then he pulled out a second paper, fresh signed by Severino earlier that day. It was a declaration of protection. A formal request for land guardianship citing community precedent and ancestral rights. Legal in parts of the region. Rare, but real. Father Elias read it twice. You're going to make it public. Barreto wants quiet fear. I want loud truth. The priest signed. Kaike left the church as the last of the rain clouds cleared from the hills. The sun broke through like a blade, cutting across the wet rooftops and shining on the one piece of land no one thought would hold. Taina met him at the gate with a look of fierce pride. You did it, I did. Then we better be ready. He nodded. Let him come. Because some men fight with guns and others with law. But the ones who fight with roots, they never fight alone. Some land you inherit in paper. Some you inherit in scars. But the land that changes you, you earn with soul. The sun rose slow, stretching thin across the soaked fields and fractured fences. Kaike stood barefoot in the mud shirt, damp from dew and sweat, watching the corn sway like it had never known war. The path behind him was finally dry, clean-cut, through the brush lined with stones, no longer a back route, now the main road. Birds scattered from the tree line. Distant hoofbeats echoed, and every instinct in Kaike's chest locked tight. Not fear, not anymore. Readiness. From behind the spring came Taina, pulling her braid through a red scarf jaw set like iron. You feel it too? She asked. He nodded once. Barreto's coming. They didn't have to guess. They knew. Barreto wasn't a man who accepted silence. He responded to defiance with spectacle, and now that the law had failed to crack Kaike's resolve and bribes had fallen flat, Barreto had only one weapon left: presence. By mid-morning, the black car arrived. Not the usual truck, not the quiet cousin or the fake mediator. No disguise this time. Just Barreto himself stepping out in polished boots, coat clean, face pale and unreadable under a wide-brimmed hat. Behind him stood Elias, arms crossed, eyes scanning the treetops, and three others, armed. Kaike didn't move. He stood at the top of the trail, hands open at his sides. Barreto walked slowly, every step deliberate, crushing mud under heel like he owned the path. You've made this difficult, he said, voice low and calm. You've made it easy, Kaike replied. How's that? You showed me what kind of man I never want to become. Barreto's smile was tired. You think this is about pride? No. I think this is about power, and what happens when someone says no to it. Barretto's face hardened. He stepped closer. You think the village will protect you? That paper, you think roots mean more than reach. I don't think, Kaike said. I know. Barretto raised his hand slightly. A subtle signal. But before the men behind him could move, a sharp whistle cut through the trees. From both sides of the trail, people emerged. Pedro with his hammer slung low, Juca holding a long-handled shovel. Dona Elza standing beside 3 young men from the village, all of them silent and still. Even Janira came, shawl-wrapped, tight eyes glowing like embers. And behind them more. Dozens. They lined the trail like fence posts, ordinary people, unarmed but unshaken. Barretto turned slowly, seeing them all. His eyes narrowed. His mouth twitched. You threatening me with pitchforks and prayers? No, Kaike said. I'm telling you, it's over. Elias took a half-step forward, hand twitching near his side. Then something strange happened. He looked at Janira and stopped. The woman didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her gaze struck harder than any gun. Elias lowered his hand. Barretto turned to him, confused. What are you doing? Elias didn't answer. The silence thickened. The air trembled. Barretto's chest rose once, twice. Then he laughed, short, bitter. This land isn't worth blood. Then leave, Kaike said. Barretto looked him up and down. You're not even a man. You're a boy standing in the shadow of ghosts. Kaike stepped forward. No. I'm a son of this soil. And you just learned something about it. It remembers who walks in peace and who tries to burn it down. Barretto stared long, then turned. Without another word, he walked back to his car, the 3 armed men trailing behind him. Elias hesitated, then followed. The engine roared to life, wheels spinning mud, and the black car disappeared down the hill. No one cheered. No one moved. Not until Kaike turned around and looked at the people who had come. Then quietly, Pedro stepped forward and placed the final beam on the shack frame. Juca lifted a bucket. Taina passed him a hammer. And the work began again. By afternoon, the roof was finished. Rain no longer mattered. The fields looked smaller now, but fuller. At the far edge, the corn had grown above knee-height. And near the spring, 3 children played in the water, tossing stones, shouting nonsense. One of them, a boy with a crooked smile and dusty feet, pointed toward the shack. Who lives there, Kaike? Another answered. The boy nodded solemnly. He owns the spring. No, the girl said, tossing a pebble. The spring owns him. Janira laughed from the porch as she listened. Inside, Kaike sat at the table reading the community protection order once more. Signed, stamped, witnessed, untouchable. He folded it and placed it in a tin box, then set it high on a shelf, not because he needed it, but because he didn't. Taina leaned in the doorway. They won't forget this, she said. Neither will I. She smiled, crooked and proud. You gonna build a house now, one wall at a time. That evening, the village shared stew beneath the stars. No speeches, no parades. Just the comfort of food fire and presence. The land didn't celebrate. It rested. And as the moon rose, Kaike sat alone by the spring feet in the water listening. It no longer murmured with tension or threat. Just peace. Earned peace. Some land comes through inheritance, some through struggle. But this land, this hard, precious, stubborn land had come through love, through hands blistered and hearts steady, through the refusal to run. And now it would remember.